Three. Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Crayden, and I have Tamara Lich with me today, and we'll be back in mere moments to discuss a variety of issues.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist.
Yes, please like the station. Do what you can to support us. If you've already subscribed and you've got unsubscribed, please subscribe again. Facebook does that to people. I hear about that every day. And tell your friends and family to watch Stand on Guard. It's so nice to have you back here, Tamara. It's been, my God, it's been too many months and so much has happened. And I've gone through hell of a lot of personal difficulties. And my sister passed away a couple of months back, largely, I believe, because of COVID vaccines. And it's funny because I went out to the Freedom Convoy protest from day one. I knew it was historic. I knew there was a reason for me to be there to report on this when few other people were really reporting on it. They were just being talking heads and talking about how horrible this was, the mainstream media anyway. And I knew I had to go. But I tell you this, it was never personal for me in terms of how the vaccine potentially could act on people. And I'm being careful about this because we still aren't allowed to be completely honest about how safe and effective the vaccine really was. But when I lost my sister last November to pneumonia, and this was somebody who's marginally older than I was, not much. Certainly, I had no anticipation I'd lose her. And she died of pneumonia last November without any real warning. And she was gone so fast, I didn't even have a chance to get on a plane from Ottawa to see her in Vancouver. And it was that fast. And I woke up the day after and I thought, this is real to me now. This is real because I hadn't lost anybody directly. And fortunately, I thank God I took the damn vaccine, but I've had no ill health from it thus far. So I'm grateful for that. But it became personal for me. And my second thought after saying it's become personal, and I said, thank God for people like Tamara Lich and Chris Barber who went out there and protested these mandates because it's not going to happen in the future. It's not going to happen. And as we were talking before this broadcast, just let the government try to do this again. Just let them try to lock down this country, to force us to take a vaccine that some people don't want to take. But let's just see them try it again because I don't think they'll succeed. I don't think this is on again. I guess is the only way to put it. I think because of the protest that you, Chris, and others in the Freedom Convoy exhibited, I think you said to everybody out there, we can stop this in the future. We can stand up for our rights and we can fight back. What do you think?
I think you're right. I mean, I don't think that the government Canada, I mean, we're known for being, very passive and polite people. And so I think it shocked a lot of people when the middle class who rarely protest, all got up out of their homes and drove across the country to stand up against this. And I think we shocked a lot of people, especially our government.
Yes, you certainly did shock the government. And they coming back with name calling and everything else they did. But with some good news lately, you can now be seen publicly with Chris Barber again. And I have a brief shot here. You retweeted Chris's post on X, so fantastic. So how did that come about?
Well, we had asked the Crown prosecutor to drop our no contact order because the evidentiary portion of our trial is concluded. And of course, the Crown prosecutor didn't agree that that was a good idea. So we had to bring a motion before the judge, and she agreed that it was a breach of our charter rights to continue. I mean, conditions are only put in place, in extreme cases, or if there is a risk to reoffend, or, and especially in me and Chris's case, it was a matter of, the evidence that could be presented after. But we rested our case, and we're so grateful that she ruled in that favor. And it was really funny. We spent the weekend up at one of our lawyers' cabins for the May long weekend, and I remember I sent him a text message, and it just hit me that I can actually just pick up the phone and call him now, which was weird. It was really weird in the beginning that we couldn't speak to each other, but then it was weird now that we can. So we're very grateful.
Have you actually personally gotten together since that order was lifted?
Yes, actually. It just so happened that the morning that the judge ruled in our favor on this motion, Chris and his children were coming up here to pick up a truck. So they were in Medicine Hat that day. So we got together and had a great visit.
Oh, that's wonderful. It was so funny attending the trial. You two had to always avoid each other, even though you're in the same courtroom together. It was separate, and you always, of course, had to enter the courtroom separately. It was quite, I guess, amusing at times. But
It was
but
a
you guys,
government imposed
yeah.
or police imposed timeout.
If there's one thing I want to be able to do is to get the word out about how fundraising is going for you, and I suppose for Chris as well. But we're talking to you today about that. So, are you short of funds for the legal expenses of this trial? Do you need to raise more money? Do people need to know that? Are you in need of fundraising right now?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I have pardon me, the Democracy Fund helping me with my legal fees. And of course, I mean, they always can use funds, because it's not just my case. There's, I think, well, at least another 1,000 cases, tickets and charges. So they're helping a lot of people. And in Chris's case, it's the JCCF that's helping him with his legal fees too. So there's always a need for it, always a need for it. And in my case, like, we've spent almost $500,000 on legal fees already. We've still got about 10 days of trial left.
Hmm.
And then, we're pretty sure if we are found not guilty, the Crown's probably going to immediately appeal. So then we have to start this process all over again. So, I don't know. I don't know when this ends.
Well, but you're okay then in terms of funds being raised. That there's no emergency right now that people
No,
need to.
no. Yeah.
Okay,
Not
well,
that I'm
that's
aware of
something
anyways.
I'm sure aware of it. You never tell with legal situations. And
Right.
anyone who's been entangled with the law in any way knows this. Anyone who hasn't been, I don't think, really comprehends how expensive it is to go to court, and especially when. I mean, how would you have anticipated a mischief charge would go on this long? And it still boggles my mind because the last time I talked to your lawyer was just after the last recess, and we spoke for quite a while outside of the courtroom, and he was quite confident of things going well, but saying things would come back for one last uh, burst of activity in what, August, September. So I'm imagining that hasn't changed. You're still anticipating going back in August or September for the last 9 days, and
Yes, yeah. We are
yeah.
scheduled to be back in court on August the 13th. I know we have 3 days secured that week, and then they were trying to secure the following week so we could finally get this wrapped up. I mean, it's the longest mischief trial in history. And mischief doesn't normally go to trial. It's a
Oh,
it's a fine and a slap on the wrist. But in our case, longest mischief trial in history.
yeah, it's usually a fight at somebody's wedding results in a mischief charge. And this I've been saying that since day one. This should never have gone to trial, and certainly here we're going to be nearing the anniversary of the beginning of this trial, because I remember it was the Tuesday after the Labor Day weekend when this thing began in 2023, and we're certainly probably going to lap that, which is incredible to me. But one of the burning questions I always had about this: do you have any idea what happened to the funds that were raised through Give, Send, Go? Were they seized? Are they still out there someplace? Were they what happened to that
Some of
money?
them were seized. Give Send Go ended up refunding everything that they could, but there was some that was coming down the payment processor Stripe, and that's what was seized. So, but everything
All right,
else was
so
returned. Yeah.
all right, so there's still some outstanding funds that what should go back to the people who donated, or to the Freedom Convoy, or is it
Yeah.
going to be
Well,
in limbo land?
yeah, it's locked up in an escrow. I think there's about $5.5 million that are locked up in an escrow, seized by the government of Ontario.
Hmm.
They have a seizure order on it as well as a forfeiture order on it. So, I mean, the outcome of our criminal trial is definitely going to affect that. We still have the civil suit, of course, hanging over our head that Paul Champ initiated.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, it's kind of in limbo. What would happen to it, I guess, if we ever do see that money is, we'll do what we said we were going to do. We've got registration forms from some of the truckers and people that were in Ottawa to reimburse them, as well as, we always wanted to donate what was ever left over to the veterans. That was always our goal. If we raised more than we needed for the truckers, then we were going to donate all the rest to veterans, and that's still very much on the table. So I don't know how long this will take for us to get access to it, if we ever do, but if we do, we'll use it for its intended purpose.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you will. It's just another gross inconvenience from this entire episode. And a lot of people always are wondering about that, but that's exactly what I thought was the case. Yes. This has been a never-ending saga of injustice for everybody. And wanted to mention as well, I saw that you had been tweeting, I guess or posting on X about the Coots 4.
Mhm.
Do you think these guys really got the shaft from our legal system in terms of what they ended up with? I
100%.
couldn't believe it. Yeah.
Two of them are still in jail. It's been over 800 days and they're still in jail. Like, where's the due process here? It's I just talked to Tony yesterday, and it always amazes me. Like, he's always in such good spirits, and he's really at peace with everything, and you know he's doing well under the circumstances, but he shouldn't be in there to begin with. I mean, it seems that whole trial. Now, I haven't been down there. I've actually tried to get down there to sit in a couple days, because obviously I'm well aware that what you read in the news is not necessarily what's really happening.
Mhm.
And then, of course, there's a publication ban on it, so the information that's getting out is very limited. But there's not a lot of transparency with this case, which is concerning, especially in light of the fact that, again, they're still in jail, no bail hearing, nothing.
No, that's to me. It strikes me that they're being treated like domestic terrorists, which of course is exactly how the Trudeau government envisioned them. That's how the Trudeau government envisioned you and the Freedom Convoy as domestic terrorists, and it boggles the mind that they are still being treated in this manner. It's beyond anything any democratic country should ever have to endure. But all we can do is to continue to support them. But the legal system has definitely treated them on a tier that no other people uh, who were charged with similar offenses would ever have been treated this way. It is
Mhm.
astounding to me that this has been allowed. But we uh, we will see where this ends up, and unfortunately,
Mhm.
it doesn't bode well. But,
No. And in the meantime, these gentlemen have lost, over 2 years of their lives.
oh yes, and as have you, and so many people associated with this, and I think there's been people who have been put on trial very quietly while you and Chris have been on trial, and have been really bypassed by any media attention. And it's just, and that's exactly the way the Trudeau government wants it, of course, because they it doesn't want full revelation. How many people have suffered as a result of this who are going through the legal process?
Mhm.
Lawfare is
Lawfare. Yeah, it's
yeah,
lawfare for sure. Sure.
as you've described it,
They want
putting
us
people
they
through
want us
this,
bankrupt and demoralized.
and all over what essentially are all mischief charges. There's really nothing beyond that. And This sets a horrible precedent, legal precedent for any Canadian in the future that could be charged with mischief and would have to endure this sort of
Deeply
thing. But that's
concerning. Yeah, people should be
you know,
concerned.
I've been fascinated recently. I just put this by you. Justin Trudeau's latest obsession, and of course trying for political survival. He's been accusing Pierre Poilievre of wanting to endanger the Charter of Rights and by using the notwithstanding clause. Because Poilievre made a remark at a meeting he was at with police chiefs where he would like to toughen up some of the criminal sentencing for real criminals, as in
Mhm.
murderers, and that they should be serving life. And of course, that's all he said. And in terms of it might require some reference to the notwithstanding clause. But so Trudeau has been coming out and saying Poilievre and the Conservatives want to knock down the Charter of Rights, want to completely obliterate the Charter of Rights, and he's called it like a a la carte Charter of Rights. I found this absolutely astounding because this is the man who froze bank accounts during the Freedom Convoy, which, of course, that really hurts people. We're not talking about sentencing murderers to death. We're talking about uh, preventing people from accessing their bank accounts so they can live. Trudeau did that. Trudeau is also considering a censorship bill called the Online Harms Act, which will make any speech he deems to be hateful essentially illegal and beyond, and potentially liable for life imprisonment. Do you find the hypocrisy of this man to be continually astounding? That he can accuse his adversaries, his political opponents, of being actually what he is. He's the guy that has scrapped the Charter of Rights in Canada. He's the guy that violates our basic freedoms. He's the guy that really doesn't care for individual freedom or democracy, but he projects that on everybody else.
Yes, he sure does. Well, we know that he loves to fearmonger, and it's actually quite nauseating to watch him say stuff like that. You know, when these MPs and Liberal MPs get up and talk about protecting the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, they literally trampled all over it. Literally trampled all over it without due process, without court orders from the judge. I mean, it's banana republic stuff. And so it's very frustrating to watch them try and paint this picture like they really care about Canadians and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because they obviously don't. They really don't. And so the pattern that I've seen with the Liberal Party in our case and in the case that you're talking about is it's just projection. You know, look at how they were accusing us of taking money from foreign entities when the Trudeau Foundation was taking money from Beijing. We were
Yeah.
accused of being, overtaken by the Russians and having foreign interference. Well, look at the Chinese interference. You know, everything that they accused us of doing is what they were doing,
Hmm.
and the case is so different.
Well, exactly. And that's so Trudeau seems to be driven by this desire to smear his political opponents with the things he's doing. And that's par for the course for most of the people in that of that political persuasion. But there's an interesting CSIS report out right now, and it's been completely ignored by the mainstream media. I was referred to it by an article in LifeSite magazine, actually, where very few people ever read, but they happen to notice it, and it's the annual CSIS report for 2023. And there's very little in it about Chinese election interference and about the need to be be aware of that. But they've created a whole new uh, category of domestic terrorism. People that are so-called religiously motivated to violent extremism. They call it RMVE. And there's also individuals who are motivated for violent extremism. And these individuals that they're targeting
Very
are
scary
parents.
words. Very scary
Yeah,
words.
yeah, and these are parents who are opposed to gender ideology indoctrination in the schools. And of course, that's one of Trudeau's obsessions. He doesn't think parents should have a say in that. He doesn't think parents should even know if their 12-year-old wants to change their pronouns, or their 12-year-old thinks he or she should have a sex change operation. That's none of the parents' business. That's the state's responsibility. So now CSIS has targeted parents as these are the new domestic terrorists. And I thought, that's the flavor of the month. Now it's the parents who oppose gender ideology. When you were in Ottawa with the Freedom Convoy, people opposing COVID mandates were the domestic terrorists. But you wonder if they ever focus on real criminals. Do they ever focus on real terrorists? Because it's interesting. I don't think we're ever going to get to the bottom of this biolab in Winnipeg, which we briefly heard about a couple of months ago now. And the committee looking into that has been completely shut down. They will not look into it any further. And we know Trudeau covered that up. But it's like you say, they accuse the Freedom Convoy of using foreign interference, but they won't reveal how much foreign interference they have benefited from. And of course, domestic terrorists, that's you and I now. That's mom and dad. That's the parents of children.
It's really anyone that
even-
sticks up for Canada. It's really anyone that actually sticks up for Canada, the Canada that we grew up in, and sticks up for the Charter, is painted as terrorists or misogynists or racists, or, like you just said, whatever the flavor of the week is.
Yeah. But I think this is ominous that CSIS is now essentially following Trudeau's advice. I don't think they got direct orders to. I think they're following what they think Trudeau wants, because Trudeau is not happy with CSIS, because there's whistleblowers in CSIS who have revealed things that Trudeau did not want us to know. So he's gone after CSIS, and CSIS is now fighting to keep their funding. I think that's all this is ever about. It's all about keeping their funding and going after the political opponents of the regime. And so I put that out there because you guys were victims of that. You were completely smeared by Trudeau, to the point of suggesting there were Nazis in the midst of the Freedom Convoy. And of course, the only Nazi that surfaced during that time was the one Trudeau invited to the House of Commons for a standing ovation. And I always tell people that, especially my American friends, because they always laugh about, where were the Nazis during the Freedom Convoy? I said, well, there weren't any. I was there. There were no Nazis, and I didn't run into any misogynists or racists either. No. It was equality. It was equality on profile for the country. It was a showcase of equality. I saw people of all races and religions getting together, and you know what? It reminded me of that last September when we had the 1 million person march here in Ottawa and across the country. Once again, we had Canadians who were united for freedom. We had Canadians, we had evangelical Christians, Roman Catholics, lots of Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, Jews, people with no religion at all, who came together and they said, I am Canadian. I believe in freedom. Stop trying to use identity politics to say that I have to vote in a certain way because of my ethnicity or my religion. I am going to make my own decisions about this. And I think that was a huge step forward for freedom. And a lot of people who were there, and I was a master of ceremonies at the event in Ottawa, and I had so many people come up to me and they said, this is Freedom Convoy too, because we were inspired by what happened in Ottawa and the Freedom Convoy, because people had the guts to say, I want to stand up for freedom. I don't care if somebody wants to smear me for doing that. I'm going to stand up for freedom. And we're going to get together and we're going to be united, no matter what our ethnicity, no matter what our race, no matter what our religion. We are united as Canadians. And I think you started that with the Freedom Convoy. There's been division over the last 6 months because of foreign wars and other things, but the 1 million person march is going to be meeting again in September. It's going to do it again this year to tell Trudeau and to tell Canadians that we are still united for freedom. And I think that's something that you have demonstrated through all you have gone through in terms of the judicial punishment, in terms of spending time without bail in prison, going through what you've gone through, and continuing to speak out with courage. And I'm always reluctant to call you a freedom convoy leader, because that's what the prosecution wants to describe you as. I call you a freedom convoy icon, as well with Chris Barber, because you have become icons not just for a freedom convoy protest, which lives on, but for every Canadian who believes in individual liberty, in freedom of speech, in freedom of assembly, in freedom of religion, and all those things that used to make up Canada, and I think will again, because we're fighting back. Because your courage
Mm.
has inspired people. And I want you to know that, because I hear that from so many people when I'm out there, and they say, you know, it's great that you're covering this trial. It's great that you continue to cover what's happening to Tamara and Chris, because they inspired me. I thought this country was a lost cause until they went out and they put their reputations, they put their livelihoods, they put their everything on the line for freedom. And if they can do that, I think I can do that too. And I think this country is still worth fighting for. So I want you to know that you have left a legacy of freedom. And of course, it's not over yet with this trial.
Yeah.
But when you win this thing, and I believe you will, and I don't think there's going to be an appeal, because I think your lawyer has tied this up so well with no loose ends that the prosecution is not going to have any room for an appeal. That might be wishful thinking, but I
Hope so.
believe that.
I sure hope
And
so.
I think you're going to win this, and I think you're going to walk away not just victorious in this courtroom, but you're going to walk away as an icon of Canadian freedom. And I think you are capable to do so much more with that in the future.
Well, thank you. I mean, there was everyone that was there was such a huge part of it, and so I can't take credit for it. Obviously, I mean, I just became visible because I was the one in front of the cameras most of the time. But I mean, everyone that was there was doing something or contributed in some way or donated something. You know, it was a true grassroots Canadian movement. And, you know, I feel that no one of us is more important or did anything more than the next person. You know, it was a true team effort. And yeah, I hope you're right. I hope we're very lucky. Both Chris and I have excellent legal teams. And so fingers crossed that you're right and there's no appeal.
Yeah, that would be a happy ending. If if there's such a thing as a happy ending after all you've been through. But do you ever envision yourself getting involved in the political process, running for office at a municipal, provincial, or federal level? I'm not asking for any particular political party, but could you see yourself, or do you envision yourself at any time in the future becoming politically involved, or do you see this something that you'd rather stay away from?
Well, I sure hope not. Because I don't want to be a politician, honestly. I sure hope not. I mean, I don't know what's in store for me once this is all over. Obviously, I follow politics very closely. And I mean, I think people should get involved, myself included, right now because of the trial and stuff that's going on. Well, as you started out the show with today, David, I mean, there's a lot of vaccine injured people out there that need help. And so I kind of want to take that on and do whatever I can do to help them or get their stories out or see how we can raise funds for them, you know, because they're being left in the dark. They're being completely stranded. I mean, look at Kayla Pollock, for example. She's severely injured, and they've offered her aid 3 times rather than deal with the problem, you know, acknowledge what they've done and help her, compensate her. She needs a private nurse. She needs a home. She needs a vehicle that she can be transported in. And then not only that, but like you said, there's still a lot of people out there that are facing charges and persecution that people don't know about. And those people also need help. So Chris and I are going to go do some fundraising as much as we can to help these people because no one gets left behind.
Well, personally, I hope you don't become involved in politics because it does detract from your message. And when I say
Yes.
you, it detracts from anybody's message. I was in politically involved in the past. I ran for public office. I've worked on Parliament Hill for members of Parliament, and I don't miss it for a moment because I would much rather have the freedom to talk about politics from an objective viewpoint, from being not part of it, but watching it, observing it, being able to criticize anybody in politics and not being tied to any one political party, any political movement, because it's a lot more fun. And I think in the end, it's a lot more edifying, not just for me, but for my audience and for people who can benefit from the experience I've had in that political process as a journalist, as a staffer, as a military public affairs officer, especially in that latter category. I was always told what to say. I was always told how much truth I could deliver. It was never the whole truth. I tried to give as much of the truth as I could, but I was always to some extent barred because there's a process you have to obey. And as an independent journalist now, I've never felt so free and so liberated and so able to talk about truth and to talk about this country as it really is and to talk about the political process as it really does develop. And I think you're going to be doing so much good outside of that process and in terms of raising money for people who need it and raising awareness of this country, the people in this country who really need to know how bad things can be. And for those who are disenchanted and those who are feeling the country has failed them, I think your story can be an inspiration and that your words can be a reason for them to continue to hope, to be optimistic, to fight back, and to believe in Canada. And there have been moments, there have been times that I've lost faith in this country and I have lost my ability to be optimistic. But when I view your story and when I look at the work the Freedom Convoy achieved, it gives me optimism, and it keeps providing me with a reason to fight for this country and not to become bogged down in the political process. So I hope you keep doing what you're doing, Tamara, because what you're doing, as I said, is an inspiration for so many Canadians who need role models like you and Chris Barber and all of those people who participated in the Freedom Convoy trial. And it's interesting, and I'll let you go on this, but when I used to see Freedom Convoy in the legacy media, it was always in quotation marks because they didn't want to say it was freedom.
So-called. We started calling it the so-called Freedom Convoy.
And I'm actually seeing reporters for some mainstream media calling it the Freedom Convoy without quotation marks. And I'm saying, I think we won a victory here because people are beginning to realize that it was about freedom. And it was that these were courageous people who did everything they could to put Canada first. They never put themselves first. It was never about ego. This was about freedom. And that's something I think so many Canadians need to hear. And we're not going to give up. You're not going to give up. Chris is not going to give up. And thank you for your work, Tamara. And thank you for again appearing on this show. And we're going to keep fighting. And we'll see you in August and September when
yes, you will.
When you're back in trial, and we'll see you when the judge announces the verdict. And I think it's going to be a happy verdict for all of us. So thank you again, Tamara. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and your work will not go unnoticed or I hope unrewarded. It needs to be recognized as a vital part of our current events and I believe Canadian history.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always lovely to see you, David.
So you get back to your driveway where the people are working on it. Fortunately, we didn't hear a noise. So
I'm so glad because it is very loud out there. Have a great